Okay, welcome back everybody to the Resilient Family webinar series. So my name is Jess Sherman. For those of you who don't know me, I am a holistic nutritionist, mom to 3. I work here at the Integrative Health, and I created this series to bring experts to you who can help you with this in order to the problem we all have, which is to raise a healthy family. My clients and courses ideas of the ability to self-regulate and create balance in your life. The ability to do really complicated cleaning the slate, know what you're dealing with. And so the expert that I have for you today is Dr. Alexis Reed, who is a naturopathic doctor, and her focus in her practice is on pediatrics and fertility and pregnancy and skincare. Her background is in biochemistry and toxicology, and in all of her training, she developed this awareness and interest in the effect of toxins on our bodies. So she's the perfect expert to bring to you on this topic of healthy living, what it means to live toxic-free living. And she's going to give us all kinds of tips and ideas for how to do this in our families, how to make it doable and manageable. What else was I going to say about you, Alexis? Yeah, so I'm going to actually turn it over to Dr. Reed, and she's going to introduce herself. And I think the first question, I'd like you to introduce yourself if you could, and then also sort of address the question of like why, from your perspective, why is it important to take toxins out of your life, and actually what we mean when we say the word toxin. Can you address that?
Sure. Okay. So I'm Dr. Alexis Reed. I'm a chemical engineer, and then I did a master's in toxicology and then naturopathic medicine. So I ended up as a naturopathic doctor. And it was, so sort of to address that question, it was during my master's that I got the awareness that there was issues with toxins. You know, being a chemical engineer, you're taught that chemicals are great and they're amazing, and they are when used properly for their purposes. But you don't really get taught anything about the dark side of chemicals. And then when I was doing my master's, I was doing breast cancer research, and we were actually taking parabens and phthalates and injecting them into our mice to cause breast tumors. To then we were testing different drugs for their effectiveness on certain types of tumors. But in order to consistently generate those tumors, we were using parabens and phthalates. So while I was going through doing my literature review for my thesis and finding out that this is something that's, these parabens and phthalates have been well established to cause breast cancer since the 1940s. They've been used in a laboratory setting since the 1940s for this purpose. And then going home that night and, you know, having a shower, looking at your shampoo, looking at your body wash and seeing these same chemicals in them and wondering, you know, how can this be? And talking about, you know, what is a toxin, that's one of the main definitions of a toxin is, you know, things get a little vague because anything is a toxin at a certain dose. Water is a toxin. If you have too much water, for example, is the dose. And that's where a lot of the issues reside in skincare, because in skincare products, you know, paraben A or paraben B has been established as safe at level X, let's say, which is fine if you only use your shampoo that it's at level X in. But the average woman uses 21 different personal care products a day. And the average baby and toddler uses upwards between 6 to 10. So if you're using 21, you're getting 21 times the exposure that's been deemed safe. And same for children, they're getting 6 to 10 times that exposure that's been deemed safe. So a lot of the issue comes with that it's regulated almost on a per product level, but not taking into account the fact that people are using multiple products. And I'm sure with this audience, you're already much more in the know than the general population. A lot of people also think that, oh, you're just putting it on your skin, you're not eating it, no big deal. But anything you put on your skin can be absorbed into the bloodstream, and that's why there's a lot of drugs that work through that transdermal mechanism. Nicotine patch, for example, birth control patches, they have drugs that deliver that way. So things definitely do cross through the skin. So what you're putting on the skin is important.
So is it fair to say that a toxin is something that your body needs to neutralize? Is that kind of a definition? Or what definition do you use for a toxin?
Yes. So a toxin can take many different forms. There's toxins in certain foods. There's toxins that are naturally derived. There's chemical derived toxins. A toxin is something that does have to be broken down. And that is done by the liver. There's a 2-phase process that takes care of that. And the liver is essentially like the oil filter on your car. All the blood goes there, it gets filtered, and then gets distributed to the body. And one of the biggest problems with the skincare products is if you eat a toxin, and by eating a toxin, I'm saying maybe you're eating a non-organic apple, so you're eating that pesticide residue. If you eat that toxin, it goes, in your mouth, into the stomach, gets broken down, then it goes to the liver and gets processed. Whereas if you put it on your skin, it's absorbed directly into the bloodstream, so it circulates around the body before it makes it to the liver for any of that processing to happen. So toxins and, detoxification and all of this is a big hot area right now, and there's multiple ways that the body naturally detoxifies itself: through sweating, through urination, through feces. All of these are sort of the end product of what's happening in the liver and within the body with our natural processes to break them down. And yes, we have these natural processes and they're still working, but we're getting, it's an input versus output. We're getting a lot more toxins in now than we used to. So yes, we can still output, 10 times the toxins that are going in, but if you're getting 1,000,000 times put in and you're only allowed to output 10 times, that's where the problem is occurring. And it's more of a problem, just back to the liver and enzymes, more of a problem with children, because we have 2 phases of detoxification in the liver, phase 1 and phase 2. And a certain set of enzymes called CYP enzymes that dictate this detoxification process. And they're also the sorts of things that break down drugs, break down supplements, make things able for you to use them. But in children, they're not fully mature yet. So yes, they can break things down, but they can't break them down as well as you and I can, which is one of the challenges and one of the reasons why they're more susceptible than us. They're essentially the canary in the coal mine with chemicals. The other reason is a lot of these chemicals are what we call sequestered in the fat cell. So it's a protective mechanism of the body to get it out of the bloodstream and get it out of circulation, puts it into the fat cells, which from an evolutionary perspective works because then it's not affecting us on a day-to-day basis. With children and with pregnant women, people are going up and down in weight, or children who are growing. As they grow, all of those chemicals that have been stored in their body fat, because they have a higher percentage body fat, are released as they're growing as well.
It's a lot to take in. I want to pick up on a couple of things that you just said. One was that transdermal toxins are, if I understood you correctly, are more potent, more powerful than toxins that we might breathe in or ingest. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't go, because it depends on the toxin and how it's broken down. They're not necessarily more potent, but our body gets a head start on breaking down ones that are ingested because it's going direct to the liver. Whereas with the ones that are transdermal absorption, depending, where it's absorbed, if it's absorbed off your foot or off your hand, it has a long track to go before it's ever getting back to the liver. So it's circulating around before it ever has that first sort of cleaning through the liver.
Okay, and I think it's also important, this whole idea of that it's stored your body has amazing, one of the things I stress with people is your body has these amazing detox capabilities, which is what you just mentioned. We're built to be able to detoxify, but it's a matter of sort of mitigating, like the input and the output. The input, what's coming in, has to match our ability to manage them, right? And it sounds like what you're saying is that, and maybe what you're seeing in your practice is that the input is overwhelming our capacity to detoxify. Is that sort of what you see?
Yes, and detoxification is very hot right now. It's a popular topic, and it often gets combated, but with people saying, but yes, aren't we designed to detox? And we've been exposed to things for years, blah blah blah, which is true, but we've been exposed to much less in the past. And there's been studies done that shows the difference between people who live in a downtown populated, pollution dense area versus people who live in the country, that they have more exposures just from exhaust and all these different sorts of things. So one of the biggest things, because obviously a lot of patients want to talk about detox because it's so out there, and it's especially something that people are interested in before they want to get pregnant. One thing I always stress about detox is that something, if you want to do it, that it should be done before you get pregnant. It's not something you should do while pregnant or while breastfeeding, because you can liberate those toxins into the breast milk or to the fetus while you're pregnant. So one of the biggest things I talk to people about with detox, because it's input output, yes, there's a bunch of things we can do to get your detox working better, your detox process is working better, and we will do them. But the first and the easiest way to get your detox processes working better is to put less in. So if you're in that overall chemical load, your body's not having to work as hard. And there's lots, it can seem very overwhelming, but there's lots of fairly easy ways to do that. Ones that
Before you get to that, I want you to tell us what those are. Though, what are some of the indicators that there's that mismatch, like too much toxicity, or either too much is coming in, or your capacity is say detox is what you need. Can you still hear me? Can you still hear me, Alexis?
Yes, now I can. I heard you say something about what are the indicators that detox isn't working, and then it went all like, so I couldn't hear you.
What are some of the things that you would see, like some of the conditions that you would see, or some of the symptoms that you would see, to make you think like either that detox maybe isn't working so well, to do some work?
The biggest area that I generally see it is in the skin. So generally, if detox isn't working, it'll show up somehow in the skin. For a lot of people, including children, that ends up being an eczema. In adults, you can see eczema or you'll see acne. In adults as well, it can show as fatigue, because you essentially are having too many toxic molecules within you, and that bogs down the system essentially. And it doesn't necessarily show up as constipation, but if people, adults or children, are experiencing constipation, then there's a fairly good chance that things aren't being processed and eliminated in a timely manner, and leading to things not working as ideally as they should. And in terms of where I would start with people to, easy changes that you can make today, the big one, and it's probably not new news, is the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. Eating organic is more expensive, I know from personal experience, and there's often things that you can't find organic, at certain times of the year, especially in Canada. So, but being diligent with that Dirty Dozen and Clean 15, and it does change every year depending on what's been going on in the pesticide industry, and one year they may have sprayed apples more, and the next year they sprayed grapes more. So there is a reason to look at it every year. It was recently released. And apples are still, they're number 2. They're still up there. They're ones, especially because kids generally really like apples. There's a good compound in the skin of apples called beta-glucuronidase that helps with detox. So apples are a good thing, but with apples, you want to make sure you're going organic. So looking at picking your fruits and vegetables wisely and saving money where you can. If you don't have the means or don't want to go 100% organic, then eating those Clean 15 conventional. Another big one is including foods that help detoxification. So things like apples, berries, they're another one that you should go organic on. Having enough fruits and vegetables within your system to help facilitate proper bowel movements. And when we're talking about proper bowel movements, it's often a common misconception. People think, you know, oh, once a day or once every other day. That's good, that's normal. But it actually should be more like a baby, where you eat and then you poop. So the ideal, what I like to see, is 3 times a day. That's not always achievable for everyone, but at least once a day, more likely twice a day, just to make sure things are moving properly, because the longer that waste is sitting in the intestine, the longer contact time there is for things to reabsorb. In terms of household products, cleaning products are a big one that people need to think about for toxic exposures, because there's also been a bunch of studies done that show that the outside air, we think of the outside air as being very dirty and toxic, but oftentimes people's inside air is more toxic. And because newer houses are designed in such a way that they're airtight, anything that you're using in your house is sticking around in there for a while. So things like all-purpose cleaners, floor cleaners, especially with children who are crawling on the floor, maybe licking the floor, like being careful which type of cleaners you're using in the house, bathroom cleaners, these sorts of things, because it is something that you're constantly breathing in and exposed to every day in your environment. Another big one that I talk about a lot is dry cleaning. There are better options for dry cleaning in terms of, you know, more reduced harsh chemical dry cleaning and steam cleaning and these sorts of things. But if you are still using the conventional type of dry cleaning, most people bring it home and put it in their closet in their bedroom, and then it's still off gases when you bring home dry cleaning. So if you are using that type, to bring it home and like leave it in the garage or leave it outside if the weather permits, and let it off gas before you bring it into your house. The other big one, especially for women and children, is plastic water bottles. Because in the plastic water bottles, it leaches hormone disrupting chemicals, especially when they're heated. So that can be a major source of toxins. And there's a big push lately, which is a great thing, for people to be drinking more water, but definitely investing. The soft plastic are the worst, but even hard plastic like a Nalgene type aren't great either. So investing in a glass for yourself or a stainless steel glass for a child is also a good idea. And there was one more that was just in my head, but now it's gone. It'll probably come back.
And I have a whole bunch of questions for you.
Sure.
And I forgot to mention this at the front, but for people who are viewing, if you have questions and you want it, there should be a chat box on the right hand side. If you're in there, there's a whole bunch. The first one goes back.
I remembered the last one.
Okay, go ahead.
The last one is something that I can't get my dad to stop doing. It drives me nuts. Heating Tupperware and saran wrap in the microwave. Do not do that. I've worked with analytical chemists over the years, and they weren't doing that 20 years ago because they knew how horrific that was. So please don't do that.
So they weren't doing it, but now they're doing it again.
No, they were already ahead of the curve like 20 years ago when everyone else was doing it. They were telling everyone not to do it. They already knew how bad it was back then. And now we're just sort of catching up.
Then, you know, every now and then something comes out in the news saying, oh, well, you know, this harmful spray is considered organic, but it, you know, it's still used on organic produce and it still passes the, you know, the conditions to label it organic, but it's actually detrimental to your health. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about our choices at the grocery store and how to make it really practical and how to not go totally crazy, you know, with all of the information that we're fed, and this is bad, this is good, this is bad. How can we do our best there? And is there anything any light you can shed in terms of the labeling laws that we have in terms of chemicals and our food?
Sure. I'm not as up on food. I'm not a farmer by any means, but I have in the past sold my products at the farmers market. So I actually have created friendships with quite a few farmers and learned a lot through that. And I think in foods similar to skincare, regulations definitely tighter in food, but there are loopholes and there are things like, as you said, you know, pesticides that are for use in organic that still might not be fantastic. Obviously not always 100% doable, but one of the best things that I have found is to have a farmer that you trust and to purchase, you know, as much as you can off them. A good way to make that more economical is with a community shared agriculture, a CSA. So you get an allotted amount of vegetables or vegetables and meat, whatever combination you want, every week. So a lot of it is based on that trust factor with whoever you're purchasing off of. And obviously, there's so much going on and things that can make you just lose your mind, and trying to do, you know, just realizing that you are making a better choice and doing the best you can too. Everything you eat, realistically, unless you homestead somewhere, everything you eat isn't going to be perfect, but trying to make the majority of your choices better. And growing whatever you can on your own too, because you know what happened to what you did on your own. And you can grow a fair amount. Like, I don't have a very big backyard. You can grow a fair amount on your own, you know, even just tomatoes and lettuce and simple things like that too that grow well here.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it also comes back to what we're going to get to in a minute, which is how to improve your body's ability to cope, right? I think we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, because you would drive yourself crazy if you try to keep all the chemicals out. But thank goodness we have this ability to detoxify, hoping that it's not compromised. So we'll get to that. I wanted to pick up also, you mentioned constipation, which is a big thing. Were you saying that toxins are causing constipation, or that constipation is a contributing factor to overtoxicity?
That constipation is a contributing factor to the overtoxicity because the elimination process isn't working properly and removing those toxins in a timely manner. Yeah. Yeah,
I see that a lot with kids who are quite constipated. It just sits there in the colon and it gets reabsorbed, and that causes a problem. So when we get to improving your detox pathways, maybe we can talk a little bit about constipation. There was one other thing I wanted to ask you. Oh, with the water bottles. So a lot of people went back to plastic when BPA was banned. Do you know, can you talk about that, whether that was a good idea? And then there was some talk about BPS and other BPs.
Yeah. So BPA being banned is, you know, I see that as a positive thing, but similarly, it's sort of one of many that are going to trickle down as showing negative impacts in plastic. Whereas it's more of a safe choice to choose an alternative with a glass or stainless steel as opposed to a plastic, because plastics are a newer compound too. You know, we've really only been dealing with plastics since the end of World War II. So there's constantly new information coming out about which ones are harmful. And plastic was seen as an amazing material, and it is, because there's so much you can do with it, but we sort of got ahead of ourselves in terms of safety testing with plastic, just started using it for a lot of applications and before we had enough time elapsed for the long-term safety data. So I think you'll continue to see, sort of as you were saying, you know, BPA, then BPS, then BPB, you'll see that continue to unravel. So I think there's safer choices to make when it comes to plastic. And obviously, again, it's you know, if you're out somewhere and you're dying of thirst and the only bottle is plastic, like, don't fall down, drink the plastic water bottle, but on a day-to-day basis, trying to make a better choice.
Nice. Okay, that's great advice. So in terms of, you know, the places in your life that you will find these chemicals, you've talked about food, you've talked about indoor air quality, dry cleaning, water bottles, Tupperware, those sorts of things. So is there anything, oh, and skincare products, any other sort of places for us to look? I'm imagining all the people watching they're going to go scour their house, and where should they be looking for toxins, and what should they actually specifically be looking for if they're reading labels? Like, what are the big culprits and where are they going to find them?
I'm just looking around my own house, thinking of different areas. Another one, and a really good resource, I actually Toronto Baby Show recently, and they have a ton of great information, and it's all a non-for-profit organization, Environmental Defense. They have on their website, they have a bunch of information PDFs and wallet guides and all these sorts of things of ways to reduce chemical exposure that sort of covers the spectrum of it. And it's a lot of information and it's very overwhelming, but I found parents were fairly receptive to it. It was nice to get some of those pocket guides, and you can contact them and they'll send you some, or you can just download it off their site as well. When in terms of renovating, it's a big thing that a lot of people are doing, you know, if at all possible, using lower VOC paints, not coming right back into the house after you've renovated. Things like carpets, off gas, new carpeting. And it's funny because I was watching a show the other day and she walked in and she was like, new house smell. And I was like, chemicals. Like that new car smell, new house smell, that's off gassing. And these are things that we associate. Same with the cleaning products, you know, a lot of people associate the smell of Pine Sol with clean, but really that's the smell of those chemicals off gassing. So just trying to also change your association with what clean smells like too. Those are big ones. Another one I'm looking into my kitchen is plastic utensils for cooking, like spatulas and those sorts of things, because once again, it's a plastic being heated. Another one that, and like, I'm not perfect either. I haven't fully eliminated Teflon, like stick resistant cooking utensils, but they say that's another one you should be working on. So the next new pot set I buy, I will be buying ones that aren't Teflon coated, because same thing with the water bottles and with the Tupperwares. Heat plus plastic plus chemicals isn't a good combination. That helps liberate the toxins even more than if it's cool. You know, if you're choosing between putting a plastic Tupperware in the freezer and putting it in the microwave, if you're short on Tupperware and you know, glass is going to go in the microwave, plastic's going to go in the freezer. So trying to find ways to do this without going crazy too. And it's about just making the changes as you can. And one question I get asked a lot is with skincare, because most people have, you know, 10 or 20 products, and they're like, I'm not just going to go buy 20 new products right at one time. Some people do. Some people, that's too overwhelming. In terms of that, I generally tell people, try to remove first the thing that you put on every day. You put on the biggest area of your body. And it's a leave-on product, so that's going to be the most absorbed. So for a lot of people, that's a body lotion or an overall moisturizer is the first thing that I usually get people to eliminate, followed by anything facial moisturizer, foundation, those sorts of things, because they're put on frequently, they're a leave-on, and they're on a fairly significant proportion of your face, as opposed to like your black eyeliner that you wear occasionally. You can keep that for now, you know, work baby steps to scale out, to get rid of those products in a stepwise fashion. And for people in Ottawa, probably already know, but just in case, a good resource for that, and especially I found them quite helpful when changing over makeup, because it can be difficult to find good makeup that's chemical free. Terra 20, they will do essentially little mini makeovers where they try different products on you, so you can see what you like and what works before you have to purchase it as well.
That's great. That's great. One thing you mentioned is that it's not more important, but it's the effects of chemicals on children is amplified because, number one, they're smaller, and number two, their detoxification isn't fully matured. So if you're going to make this transition, if this is all new to you, you want to make the transition, maybe making it on those children's products that you don't have a mass of yet necessarily if your children are small. And then starting to transition your own, not that you're less important than your children, but that you probably have more personal care products for you than you have for your children because they're more new to the world. I'm totally guessing, but that might be one idea. Can I ask you what you think about sunscreen? What's your take on sunscreen? Because that's another leave-on product that's full of controversy.
Sunscreen is huge controversy. Sunscreens have bad ingredients. It's one of those things where you have to weigh, cost benefit. And because I get a lot from people that they don't like the natural sunscreens, they're thick, they don't rub in, et cetera, but that's how they work. Because the natural sunscreens primarily use zinc or titanium dioxide as a barrier function to protect against that skin, whereas the conventional sunscreen has a chemical reaction to protect the skin from the sun. So I definitely, I hear from a lot of parents as well that, it's really difficult to rub in a thick sunscreen on your 2-year-old who's squirming around. And the Coppertone spray is much more convenient, which I can attest to myself, but especially because it's one of those products with children who are going to be outside at daycare or recess or wherever. It's something that people are very diligent about putting on. So it is one that I would choose as a natural. And one of the questions I get asked a lot from new parents, because on the conventional sunscreens, and for years we've been told don't put sunscreen on babies under 6 months. That is, and I've done a lot of digging into this, that is due to the chemicals in the conventional sunscreens being more harmful on children under 6 months. It's there's a lot of information going on there too. When a baby's under 6 months, it's fairly easy to keep them covered or keep them in the shade too, because they're not mobile. But I often get questions, if we're going to be somewhere where there's no shade, can I put a little on their face? It is fine to put a little bit of natural sunscreen on a baby under 6 months. Zinc oxide is the main ingredient, and that's something that's commonly found in diaper creams. It's not something that you need to worry about with a baby. That's more of a warning for conventional sunscreens, but definitely working for natural sunscreens for children. And I'm just thinking, I used to have a natural sunscreen for children, but regulation changes have made it such that it has to be made in an accredited facility, and that's just far too expensive for me at this point in time. So the ones that I'm recommending now is Green Beaver. It was the first Canadian 100% natural sunscreen. It is a little thicker than some of the other ones, but it does work well. Because you also want one that, says SPF 30, gives you that SPF 30 as well. And the other one that I've suggested to people that they are liking is Goddess Garden. They're out of the US, but yeah.
Was it the Environmental Working Group or maybe another watchdog who did a whole clean best sunscreens, worst sunscreens? I wish I knew which one that was.
I believe it was EWG. Yes, I saw that a while back. I'm pretty sure it was them.
So can we talk a little bit about labeling and about greenwashing? Because I know a lot of the stuff says it's all natural, says it's all pure, and may or may not be, depending on the company. Can you speak to that at all? What should we look out for? Are there any tricks? Because I didn't mention this at the start, but Dr. Reid has created her own line of natural personal care products called EcoChic and EcoChic. And they're amazing. I've tried them, and so you might have a little bit of insight into the labeling laws. Can you speak to that?
Sure. Sorry, someone just banged on my door. We have incessant telemarketers here. Distracted me. And yes, maybe I should have thought twice when I named my company, because it's often questioned, is it eco? Is it eco? Things you don't think about in the beginning. In terms of labeling, there's a lot of gray area in labeling. And it's interesting because, especially in the earlier days, I was always that person in Shoppers Drug Mart, taking pictures of different labels and, just to have some of this material so I could put it in slideshows to show people. The words natural, pure, clean, all these mean nothing in Canada. In order to label something as natural, it has to have one natural ingredient in it, which most things do in terms of water. So it really doesn't correlate to anything concrete, those labelings. And in terms of what's going on with greenwashing, so greenwashing is products that are companies trying to portray products as, you know, green or toxin-free, this sort of product, when they're not. This is happening because the big brands are seeing that consumers, that's what consumers want, and they're interested in it. So they're trying to appeal to that market. One of the biggest loopholes with labeling that I see is in terms of fragrance or perfume. It's labeled on products. So it'll say either fragrance or parfum. That's a big loophole because that's considered proprietary information for the company. So that's considered their secret sauce, how they make their, so they don't have to disclose what's in that. In a fragrance, you almost always have parabens and phthalates, but you could technically, it's a big loophole because you could technically write paraben phthalate free, but if you read the label and see parfum, they're most likely lying. So it's a big loophole that people use to be able to portray products one way when really it's not toxin free at all. So in terms of what to look for, because it can become very overwhelming. And I have a series of blog posts on my website that show my dirty dozen to avoid in skincare products, but it can become very overwhelming. I know even myself, I am at Shoppers Drug Mart, pull something off the shelf, look at the label, and I still don't know what, you know, and this is what I do, and I still don't know what 20% of those things are. But it highlights the big ones to avoid, and, you know, parabens end in a ben, and phthalates might also be called this. It highlights those sorts of things. So that's a good resource on my website, ecochicmovement.com, in the blog section. It's there. Where was I going with that? Oh, things to look for. So that's things to avoid. Big things to avoid are parabens, phthalates, sodium lauryl sulfate, anything petroleum based. So that is petroleum jelly, Vaseline, but also mineral oil, because they're often contaminated with a compound called 1,4-dioxane, which is a known carcinogen. So avoiding anything that's petroleum based. Johnson & Johnson used to have a compound in their baby wash and lotion that converted to formaldehyde, but that has been removed in Canada since I started doing this, so that's a good thing. That was one to avoid that I used to tell people, but it's not as much of an issue anymore. Triclosan, which is a component of antibacterial soaps, is one to try to avoid for a lot of reasons. It's not great for us putting antibacterial soaps on, you know, in terms of that first contact, but it's also causing a lot of downstream effects in the environment and causing antibacterial resistance, because we're having micro doses of this triclosan going into our wastewater constantly, which ends up being a lot of this antibacterial component, which is causing those systems. So that's one to avoid. In terms of one of the biggest things that can be confusing for people is in naturally derived products, there you'll often see Latin names on the labels, and that can look like a scary ingredient, but it's not. So anytime there's a Latin name present, that means it's an herb, it's an oil, it's a butter, it's naturally derived, because that's showing its species name and it's naturally derived. So that's not something to be afraid of, because I generally go by the rule, if you can't pronounce it or figure out what it is, probably not the best idea, with the exception of Latin. And there'll be 2 words there in Latin if that is the case. And looking for things, a lot of the problem is with scent. So as I was saying before, people, you know, associate Pine Sol with clean or new car smell with clean. A lot of that, and I notice this all the time at shows, the first thing everyone does when they try, you know, try some body butter, try this, try that, the first thing they do is smell it. And everyone's very hung up on how things smell. And I'm not saying my products smell bad, they don't, but everyone's really hung up on how things smell. And that's the biggest contributor to that chemical overload and toxin overload, is the smell. Because even in more mainstream products, their naturals line, their ingredients will be not bad, but then if you keep reading, there's always perfume, there's always fragrance. So it's really that smell clean association that you need to step away from. And if scent is something that you do want or desire in your products, look for something that's scented with essential oil. I'm not going to go down the essential oil wormhole, but it is also something that is gaining a lot of popularity right now, which I don't think overall is a bad thing because it indicates people wanting to move to a more natural, better way. But essential oils, same thing. They're natural. Just because it's natural doesn't mean it's safe. Essential oils are very potent, and there's certain ones that shouldn't be used on children, and you have to be careful with essential oils. And myself and colleagues of mine have been observing people ingesting essential oils, and that is absolutely something that you don't want to do. They're not made for internal ingestion. They're not made to be put directly on the skin without being diluted. And we have seen cases of people having liver damage from ingesting essential oils. So yes, essential oils are a good choice when used responsibly. And there's a lot of information out there on how to use them responsibly. So don't just take for face value what someone tells you is safe with essential oils.
Okay, I'm going to attempt a little recap, and then I want to talk about improving your detoxification pathways. So far, I'm hearing that some things to do, some places to look consider shifting things a little bit in your life to try to decrease the amount of chemicals that are coming in is to go take out the Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen. Make sure your indoor air quality is improved, whether that means sort of taking off shoes at the door or getting air purifiers if you're super sensitive. Think twice about dry cleaning, and anything that smells is off-gassing, and maybe leave it in your garage a little bit before it comes in the house. Be aware of water bottles, switch to glass and or stainless. BPA having been banned is a great thing, but it's been replaced by other things that we don't know a whole lot about, like BPS and such. Microwaving in plastic and plastic wrap is a no-no. Sunscreen is okay as long as it's a natural sunscreen, and it's always going to be a little bit harder, but that's the point of it, is that it's creating a barrier for the sun. What else did you say? Plastic utensils and nonstick pans. I switched over to ceramic pans, which I am loving. They're expensive, but they are amazing. The ceramic, I've got a little pot and a frying pan, as well as cast iron and glass. Those are the ones that I've switched over to. So consider maybe getting some of that in your kitchen. And then in terms of what to look for in labels, the fragrances and the perfumes often have the phthalates and the parabens in them. Anything petroleum-based, try to stay away from. Triclosan. Latin names are good, and essential oils are fine, but be cautious internally. And those things that say like 100% natural, 99% natural ingredients, the word natural really doesn't mean anything in Canada. Is that sort of a rundown? Do you want to add anything in terms of like the take-homes of what people are going to come and talk about detox?
I know, I'm sorry, it's a lot. Yes, and also it is overwhelming, and I've been very immersed in this world for almost 5 years now, and still every day I'm like, I should be doing this, or every day you learn something else that you're doing wrong. So also just to try to even change one or two things makes a big difference, and trying to start with that thing that you're doing the most. So if you're drinking out of that plastic water bottle all day every day, that's the easiest first switch. Do that easiest first switch first.
Yeah, make things manageable, and please take it easy on yourself. We have a gazillion things going on as parents, right? So yeah, simple changes. What's one simple change you can make? Okay, let's talk about detox, because when it comes down to it, really that's our best defense, is what our body is capable of doing. So can you talk a little bit about improving your body's ability to manage all of these toxins?
Sure. So I alluded to it a bit earlier, but one of the best ways is to make sure digestion is working properly, which means frequent bowel movements, 1 to 2 a day, just to keep everything moving through the tract is one of the easiest ways to manage it. Also making sure you're drinking enough water, so you're flushing those water-soluble toxins in the urine. Another sort of reason to exercise. Every time you sweat, that's another mechanism of elimination, so getting that out through the skin. Things like dry skin brushing are another one that can help. So dry skin brushing is done with a loofah type material, just in circles on the arms and legs, always going towards the heart, because that's where all of the lymph is collecting, so it can circulate and then get detoxified. A big one that especially works for adults too, but especially for children with constipation, is castor oil tummy rubs. So you do that in a clockwise direction on their stomach, and that is the same path that the intestines take. So castor oil is a sort of sticky oil, and it helps increase lymph flow and circulation. So it can just help increase the frequency of those bowel movements, not causing diarrhea or anything, but bowel movements a little more frequent. But yeah, there's definitely something to be said for getting your sweat on, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week is helpful for detoxification as well. Lots of water and keeping the bowels moving are the biggest ones I do. Then there's also foods that help your liver. So foods that are easy to incorporate into your life. 2 of the big ones that are already in a lot of things you eat anyway, garlic and onions are big liver foods. Same as leafy greens. So kale, arugula, dandelion's a really good one if you can stomach it. Kale, arugula, dandelion, spinach, all these leafy greens are good for the liver, as well as beets are a big one for the liver to help keep things moving. And with the liver in general, we think of bitter foods help the liver secrete bile, which helps everything process as it should. So having a little bit of bitter food too. That's something that used to be done traditionally before a meal. People would have a little bit of bitter food before a meal to sort of get digestion started, and something that's been lost in the last 50 to 100 years. So it's not a bad idea to bring that back. Some people would have a little bit of apple cider vinegar, a little bit of lemon. A lemon water is something that is good for the detoxification process as well.
Oh, lots of practical advice there. Do you ever suggest Epsom salt? Have you found that to be effective in the bath as a detox?
I suggest it a lot for magnesium deficiency, but no, I haven't for detox. Interesting. But yeah, I do suggest it for magnesium and difficulty sleeping with children. No, but I haven't as much as a detox mechanism.
I add that in sometimes for especially children that are really picky and don't have a very varied diet, as a way to get sulfur in, because it's magnesium sulfate, so as a way to get transdermal sulfur in, and because you need sulfur also to help that liver detox process. I've found that to be somewhat, it's hard to tell with these things whether they're, which piece of the puzzle is actually working and is actually helping. You throw a lot of strategies at a family and see what results you get, right? You've probably seen that too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's hard to tell what exactly does what, because it's often a big combination of things that get you that desired result too.
Oh, I just started speaking and I was muted, sorry. Those are a lot of really practical tips, and I think for all of us parents, we need practical, doable strategies. And I think you said it so nicely earlier when you said, just pick something that seems doable and do it, and then pick another one, and then the next thing you know, you've made a whole bunch of changes. Maybe it takes you a year to get there, or 2 years, or 5 years, but as long as you're moving in the right direction, that's progress. Can you give us your website again for the blogs that you mentioned?
Sure, it is ecochicmovement.com. So that's ECOCHIC movement.com. And I also do a lot of, I post my own blogs there, but a lot of other articles that I find too on the Facebook page as well. So it's just Facebook and then Eco Chic Movement. I post a lot of content there as well for parents.
amazing resources. So also, Dr. Reed prepared a little handout for you. If you want to grab that, you should be able to see it in the side. And if you can't, for some reason, just email me at info@jesssherman.com and I will send it directly to you, or I'll send you the link and you can get it. So she's got 5 cancer-causing chemicals. Being a breast cancer researcher, I'm sure that's fascinating that you were actually inducing cancer using phthalates and parabens. That's very, very scary. But that's her background too. So she has a lot to say about cancer prevention. And so you can download your copy by just clicking on that button. It should take you to another screen and you can get it. And that's also going to get you on Dr. Reed's mailing list. So she has lots of more information on how to help you with this, how to help you live a healthy lifestyle free of chemicals. I would put a plug in. This webinar isn't about her products, but I would certainly put a plug in for her products because it's difficult to find trusted names because you think something's great and then all of a sudden some expose comes out and you don't know whether to trust it and you don't know whether to trust the product anymore. But I would stand behind her products because they've got a really nice texture to them and they are totally toxic free. Are they totally toxic free? Do you have anything nasty in there that you want to reveal? Tell us a little bit about you.
No, so it's sort of, what are the things people always ask me. So I do use a preservative in my products, but it is plant-based, and I actually import it from England because their regulations in the European Union are light years ahead of ours. So I actually wasn't able to source a preservative that was appropriate in North America, so I bring it in from over there. Questions I get asked a lot. So it has salicylic acid in it, which sometimes people when they're pregnant will contact me and be like, oh, I thought you weren't supposed to use salicylic acid when you're pregnant. And it is one of those dose dependent sort of things. So there are articles online talking about salicylic acid when you're pregnant, salicylic acid in acne products when it's at 5% or 2.5%. So salicylic acid is derived from willow bark, a tree, and it's also one of the precursors to aspirin, but that's a side note. So it's antibacterial, so that's why it works for acne. So it's used in acne products, it's 5% to 2.5%, whereas in the preservative system, it's only 0.25%. So it's 10 times less. So it's very low level, and it's just to control the. One of the big issues with it is it can cause skin sensitivity at the higher levels, especially when you're pregnant. But at the 0.25%, it doesn't cause those effects. But yeah, that's one I commonly get asked. I'd say that's one of most commonly people ask about, yeah.
Where can they get your stuff?
So I have a full store online on my website, Eco Chic Movement, and then there are 25 stores across Ontario. I'm currently expanding in an expansion into more stores. So also if you're not in the Ottawa area and have a baby store that you love or somewhere that you think would be a good fit, feel free to post that on the Facebook page or email me and make mention of that. In Ottawa, the products can be found at Terra 20, Rainbow Foods, Baby en Route, Belly Laughs, and one of the bigger announcements is they have just been picked up by Whole Foods Ontario stores. So they will be in the Whole Foods in Ottawa and the GTA in the next, most likely 1 to 2 months, just finishing up the last little loose ends with that.
Awesome. And we have them here at the Ottawa Integrative Health Center. We have them downstairs. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and your time. And if this will be available on replay, and you can watch all the other webinars that I've done for the Resilient Family with the other experts that I've had. They are all in my members area. You can set up a free account at my website, which is just www.jesssherman.com, and just click on free membership and set up your account, and you can see all of the other ones in there, and you can replay them as many times as you want, as well as this one. And thank you. Thanks so much for coming and for spending your time with us.
Thank you. Thanks for
Still there?
having me. Hopefully, hello, did it work?
Yep.
Hello? Okay. I was like, thanks for having me, and hopefully it wasn't too overwhelming for you, and just also take comfort in the fact that I still get overwhelmed by this every day. There's always something new to learn, but just focusing on doing the best you can and making those easy changes that you can implement, as soon as you get off the webinar.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks.